Arabs were accustomed to offering sacrifices before these idols and stones. Nevertheless, they were aware of the excellence and superiority of the Kaaba, to which they went on pilgrimage.
Muhammad, however, did not speak so kindly of Luhay, the first Arab associated with the Kaaba. He said,
"I saw Luhay dragging his intestines in hell. I asked him about those who lived between his time and my time, and he said that they had all perished."
Muhammad went on to say,
"This led the Meccans to worship stones. Thus generations passed, and they forgot their primitive faith and adopted another religion, replacing that of Abraham and Ishmael. They prayed to idols and adopted the same errors as the peoples before them. Yet they held fast to the Kaaba and circumambulated it, the greater and lesser pilgrimage, the standing place, and the cry, 'At your service, O Allah, at your service.'"
We have arrived at the crux of the matter. Muslims reading these words will recognize that the rituals just depicted form the very heart of Islam. Yet Muhammad, Islam's founder, conceived none of these religious rites. Every Islamic doctrine and ritual existed before the Quran, Muhammad, or even the first Muslim graced our world. As Ishaq has correctly explained, Islam was practiced in all of its glory before the Islamic prophet was born. And while that's a problem, it gets worse in context. The practitioners were all pagans, and the rites were all directly related to a religious scam, a money-making scheme. That's why, according to Muhammad, they were all damned to drag their intestines through hell. Over these next pages, you're going to discover how Muhammad's great-great-great-grandfather Qusayy capitalized upon the work Luhay had done when he carried idols and stones back to the Meccan shrine. Qusayy, a pagan, an opportunist, and a very creative, albeit twisted fellow, invented every important Islamic ritual and doctrine to gain power and money. Qusayy invented the religious scam Muhammad dusted off and called Islam. How do I know this? Simple. All we know about Qusayy and the early Meccans comes from the Hadith, and that's what it says. So that begs another question. Why would Islam tell us something so damning to Islam? I believe they had to. The Quran and Hadith make it clear that every Islamic rite was already being practiced by the pagans of Muhammad's day, so they were compelled to provide a reason. The Quran makes no reference to explain the nature of prostration or the Hajj, so the Hadith had to. Moreover, for Muhammad to be a biblical prophet, he had to be connected to Abraham. How is that possible if Muslims don't first connect him to the most important Meccan? And finally, the whole story of Islam is about Muhammad coveting the Kaaba. Unless we know who founded it and nurtured the scheme during its entrepreneurial phase, we'll never understand who is doing what to whom or why. But as with all things Islam, it's a two-edged sword. One side cuts through the fog of ignorance. The other kills the ignorant.
Ishaq. The Quraysh had a well in the Kaaba and an idol called Hubble. They adopted Asaf and Na'ilah by Zamzam, sacrificing beside them. They were a man and a woman of the Juram tribe, Asaf bin Bagi and Na'ilah bin Dik, who were guilty of sexual relations in the Kaaba, and so Allah transformed them into two stones. Aisha said, "We always heard that Asaf and Na'ilah copulated in the Kaaba, so Allah transformed them into stones."
Ishaq says that Luhay's Quzas eventually permitted Kanaya's Qurayza to return to the Kaaba. The Quraysh, Muslims would have us believe, are direct descendants of Abraham through Ishmael. F.E. Peters, in his book Muhammad in the Origins of Islam, explains, the tribal eponym Kana'aya stands for 15 generations after Ishmael in the line of direct descent, and Qusayy, the chief actor in what follows, is 8 generations after Kana'aya. Thus, according to Islamic reckoning, Ishmael's descendants returned to their father's town some 7 centuries after he and Abraham built the Kaaba in Mecca. In the meantime, the Ishmaelites, now called the Quraysh, had generally lived dispersed in scattered settlements throughout the neighborhood. Peters is brilliant, and his research is impeccable, but this is nonsense. It's not his fault, mind you, but the Muslim sources themselves. They had no idea who the Quraysh were or from whence they had come, but in a desperate grope for legitimacy, they were ever prone to make-believe. Abraham lived around 2000 BCE. 7 centuries would place us in the 14th century BC, not 5th century AD. The Ishmaelites are traced to the Sinai, not Arabia, but this is the least of their problems. Islam's justification for promoting Allah and his Kaaba is all derived from having had it built by Abraham, the great Jewish patriarch, and then having Muhammad been a direct descendant of his son Ishmael. Neither are true. For according to Islam's own traditions, the Kaaba was first ennobled by some stones Luhay hauled from a Syrian hot spring. The lure of a miracle cure begat a religion. Ishaq's Surah opens with a section entitled,
Muhammad's Pure Descent from Adam. This is the book of the biography of the Apostle of Allah. Muhammad was the son of Abdallah, bin Abdul Muttalib, bin Hashim, bin Abd Manaf, bin Qusayy.
And so on, a total of 13 generations to Kana'aya. Ishaq lists another 15 generations back to Abraham and Ishmael. The accounting from Abraham to Noah and ultimately to Adam came directly out of Genesis, and is of little value in that we are all descendants of Adam and Noah. However, I'd like to apply some simple math to the more recent genealogy to show that the first Muslims were clueless. Qusayy, the founder of the scam that became Islam, preceded Muhammad by approximately 80 years, and Luhay, the founder of the Kaaba, preceded Qusayy by the same length of time. Similarly, Kana'aya could not have been more than 100 years removed from Luhay, which puts us in the early part of the 4th century AD. To make Muhammad's genealogy pure, 15 generations would have to span over 2,300 years. Put another way, the Jews, who maintained precise written records in their temple in anticipation of the Messiah, listed 41 generations from Abraham to Christ. Another 15 would be required to arrive at Kana'aya's time, a total of 56, nearly 4 times the Islamic number. Why this may seem trivial in comparison to the sun setting in a muddy spring surrounded by extraterrestrials, it's not. Islam is completely dependent upon establishing a link between Abraham and the pagan rites practiced around the Kaaba. If their chronologies are errant by a factor of 400%, it does not bode well for the rest of their theory. The earliest record of Mecca, with even a modicum of veracity, pertains to the Jurham. They were alleged to have camped periodically in the valley that later became Mecca. Tabari, the earliest Muslim historian, would have us believe that the Jurham practiced pagan rites identical to current Islamic rituals in the 5th and 6th centuries AD, and that this is the first historical indication of Mecca, its people, and shrine. The Muslims are out on a 2,500-year-old limb. Ishmael was born around 2000 BC. There is no tangible evidence to connect the dots between the biblical character and Mecca, much less with Muhammad, Allah, and the Kaaba. 25 centuries of historical silence is a very long time, especially for an illiterate people. It was in the muddle of ignorance that Qusayy was about to found a family business and establish himself as Muhammad's mentor. Islam's unofficial patriarch was born at the end of the 5th century AD.
Tabari. Qusayy asked his mother which tribe he came from. She answered, "You are the son of Kilab ibn Murrah, ibn Kab, ibn Luhay, ibn Ghalib, ibn Fir, ibn Malik, ibn al-Nadar, ibn Kinana al-Qurayshi."
To which he said, "Good grief, I think I'll change my name."
Your tribe lives in Mecca by the Kaaba. This revelation awoke in Qusayy a strong desire to return to Mecca and join his people, the Quraysh.
Mecca was hardly a prize, though. There were no permanent homes, only tents. Flash floods were a menace in the summer. Heat was unbearable, as there was no shade. People passed through, but no one lived in Mecca. Mom told her son,
"Wait for a sacred month and go with the pilgrimage." Qusayy waited until the sacred month arrived, and the pilgrims set out. When he reached Mecca and had completed the pilgrimage, he remained there.
One of the 5 pillars of Islam is to complete the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca in the sacred month. This hadith proves that the rite was idolatrous 5 centuries before Muhammad said it was